Hello everyone, this is Reventure, and Reventure is kind of a difficult game to do a video about for me because one thing I like to do on this channel is not have too many spoilers in videos, not spoiler too much of the game, but just because of the way that this game works, it is actually somewhat difficult not to do that, because basically just talking about the game at all or showing almost any of it could be considered technically a spoiler. So I'm just going to, not try to show like huge varieties of various clips in the background showing all sorts of stuff and things like that like I would normally do, because I want to kind of keep the game keep you in the dark, I suppose, about a lot of different aspects of the game, but I'll have to talk about at least some of it and show at least some of it because that's how a video works. But this is Reventure. What the heck is it? It's sort of like a choose-your-own-adventure on hard drugs, you could say. It's a little bit similar to something like Minute or Karoshi, or even though it's not mechanically that similar, kind of thematically similar to something like Half Minute Hero, in the idea that it's sort of like a set of absurd micro-adventures that you go on and end in some spectacularly weird fashion, and then, start over and go on another one and try something else than what you tried last time and see what happens. It is a game that has very simple mechanics, but is actually really compelling just because of the variety of things that can possibly happen and how weird it gets. So, the way that it begins is you are in a house, you wake up, and you go on an adventure to save a princess. Very basic, very cliche on purpose, and very simple. And as you might guess, it doesn't remain that simple for very long, because there's a lot of crazy nonsense that happens that involves, taking over kingdoms, murdering dragons, launching nuclear bombs at castles, all sorts of weird things, and you just have to sort of figure your way around the game's weird rule set and see what happens this adventure. You have a very specific jump height in the game, and that's actually really important because there are various items that you can pick up, and each of them does all sorts of different things and can be interacted with at various points for different reasons, and that's sort of part of the adventure aspect of the game, is to actually figure out where these items are, how quickly and what different ways you can get to them, and what they can do at various points throughout the game for you. Most basic one is, for instance, your sword, which you use to poke things for the most part, but it also has a couple of other uses, and it's quite nice to have for various reasons. And sometimes you want to have the sword to get through a particular area, or sometimes you might want to figure out if you can get through a particular area without the sword at all, because you want to use something else. You can hold about 4 items or so, and the reason for that is every time you pick up an item, the weight actually affects your character and your jump height decreases. So when you don't have anything at all, you're completely unburdened and you can jump quite high, and there are lots of areas in the game that you can get to in a much more direct and easy fashion because of your ability to make all these jumps. But pick something up and you'll notice you can jump significantly less high, and that continues. If you get 2 or 3 items, you will jump even less high and will have a harder time reaching other areas, so you have to actually, manage your jump height and the various obstacles that you'll be facing with the things that you might need to carry with you to face them, which is an interesting concept and makes the whole game basically one giant environmental puzzle, which is kind of compelling, actually. And you can carry, like I said, I think it's 4, because after that you actually will get crushed to death by the weight of all the gear you're carrying, and yes, that is in fact one of the endings. And in fact, this game touts itself as having 100 different endings, and it does. In fact, it actually counts them for you. Each achievement that you get for the ending is actually numbered with the number of that ending. The game's main screen is actually a sort of large screen of portraits, each representing one of the 100 endings that you've gotten, and blank spaces for the ones that you have yet to obtain. And you're actually given a percentage as well of how much of the endings you've completed, as well as how many other people have made it through this many of them. So, as I said, the main goal is technically to rescue a princess, but of course you'll be doing all sorts of things aside from that just to see what happens. You can find a dragon, for instance, and you can approach the dragon from different directions depending on how you actually found it, and with different items that will do different things, and there will be several different endings that you can obtain depending on what you actually decide to do. A large portion of the game is actually just exploring the world and seeing what is there and what various things you can find to do something with. And then once you've sort of found a location that you see multiple different possibilities for, you then will be returning to that location each life to see what all you can do in it, basically. You might say that that does put a bit of repetition in the game, although I would say it's not necessarily bad repetition, because the world, although is sizable, it doesn't take very long to traverse, and there are various shortcuts that you can find to get to other areas quickly. And this means that although there will be a bit of repetition in terms of, well, that room had a bunch of stuff to do in it, I need to get back to that room multiple times and repeat everything that I needed to do to actually get there so that I can see what other endings I can get there. But it's, like I said, a fairly small amount of repetition in comparison to the actual new stuff, all the various endings and new things that you'll be finding. So it's not too bad, actually, in that respect. That is something that games like this can actually suffer from, the sort of like repetitive syndrome, and this game does what other games like Minute, for instance, do in terms of making sure that even though the world sort of resets after you get an ending, it doesn't necessarily mean the world is unchanged. There are other things that can be done after you get certain endings that you couldn't do before. You know, for instance, there's a very important item, a chicken, that spawns after a certain number of endings, so that is something that you'll have to like work your way towards. It doesn't take that long. You may, for instance, get a particular ending that puts a statue at a certain location that will change the way that the jump height works in that location so that you can actually cross it with different items than you could before because of this extra boost that the statue gives you. You may find simply cosmetic endings that will put like a big blood stain somewhere where you've died before, or a like a crashed bus in the side of a cliff, no hints on how that got there, and some other things like that. So it's kind of all about not just seeing what endings you can get, but also seeing what has changed after you get the endings, which kind of reminds me of how you're expected to play games like Majora's Mask a little bit, because, you know, you have to see what changes and what doesn't change every time you reset, and then this helps you actually get farther and farther through your adventures each time and do the different things maybe in different orders and more efficiently. And that's very much the sort of same mindset that you have to approach this game with. You'll also find yourself playing as a bunch of different characters, because of course some of them will die. Actually, many of them, probably almost all of them, will die. And depending on the ending that you got, you'll actually come back as something different. Everything from a cat to just like the cousin of who you were playing as last time, to the same person but with tons of spikes in them, or the same person but raised as a zombie, or a dog, or a boneless abomination of just flopping skin. You never know what's going to happen, and that's actually pretty interesting. And in fact, there is a specific ending that gives you a wardrobe that allows you to deliberately select which sort of character you want to play as, which is pretty cool. There's also a certain element to streaming the game. There's actually a very easy to find phone booth that allows you to activate a sort of Twitch integration, which is a hard word to say apparently, if you want to, that allows you to, I believe what happens is, for the most part, the characters that you play as, they have names, and the names are mentioned in the ending sequences, because each ending has like a little write-up, and the names will change to people in the chat and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure, so that you'll sort of be horribly killing all of your viewers, basically. It's a pretty interesting game, actually, and it definitely has... well, it's got quite the sense of humor, and I suppose that's going to be a bit of a take it or leave it thing for some people. Some people are going to really, really enjoy the kind of absurdist humor that the game actually has, and some people might not get along with it. I like it. I think it's pretty funny, actually. It's got all sorts of different references and things, but it doesn't rely exclusively on like pop culture references, and it doesn't really shove them in your face. So some of them are a little more subtle than others, and some of them are just supposed to be like little jokes. So really, the game has a ton of different, I guess, pop culture references and other things like that, but it doesn't thrive exclusively off of those, and it has its own identity as well, and it is pretty funny. A lot of the just various little things that happen can be really, really funny, and in fact, some of my favorite parts have been getting some sort of crazy ending, and then the little write-up at the end, coupled with the sort of text that appears right before you wake up again for your next adventure, showing like what has happened since that ending occurred. It can be really funny and can actually set up who you are going to play as right before you jump out of bed to definitely make you laugh. I would say this game is pretty good at making you laugh, and it's not like a frustrating, crazy, difficult game. It's just a game that has all sorts of little absurdist moments that can keep you interested, because there are 100 of them and you want to find all of them, and it actually does a really good job at actually making you want to go throughout the experience and figure these out. You know, there are some things that I've seen in the game that I have yet to figure out, because I just haven't, I'm like a bit over halfway through it. I haven't done everything there is to do by any means, so there's still some little bits here and there that I'm really confused and really curious as to what they are, and when I might finally have that, like, you know, that aha moment that makes you realize that you can actually do something with it now and what you're actually supposed to do. And the funny thing about this game is, it's so ridiculous at times that even in those moments where you finally discover something that you've been kind of looking for the answer for a while, you still don't really know what's gonna happen when you actually do it until you just go and do it and see what happens. It's a very cute game, and like I said, it's just like a sort of fun, cute series of micro adventures that you go on. You can complete an ending to this game anywhere from like a few minutes of moving around to like a couple of seconds, depending on what happens. In fact, it's entirely possible to wake up, go out of your house, trip on a rock, and faceplant in front of one of the castle guards, and that is actually an ending. And it happens in like 3 seconds, and that's all you get. So it's, again, probably like games like Minute and things, it's going to attract a similar audience, and in fact, in terms of attracting an audience, its Steam page actually has overwhelmingly positive reviews shown on it, which I think goes to show just what the game actually is if you read a lot of them. It's about these little bursts of adventure and this overarching environmental puzzle that the game itself actually is. And as you solve little bits of the puzzle, you will get new endings, and it sort of is that somewhat addicting mixture of very small, manageable timescales of adventuring and stuff, mixed with trying to figure out little things that may take a little bit longer each time, but every time you have one of those aha moments where you discover something, it opens up several new endings that may open up several new endings themselves, and it just sort of keeps cascading from there, and you keep discovering weird things to do. You know, like for instance, you may run around and discover that in a certain area of the map there is a sacrificial altar that actually takes off any of the items that you're currently holding when you go through it. And there is an ending related to just feeding that altar items, but of course just the idea of removing some items is useful because that will restore your jump height, and the world's progress that you've had until then is still kept. So you can, for instance, maybe you need to get the chicken, the bird, to a far-off location, and you just don't know how to get there, but then you think, well, maybe I can just take the sword first to cut my way through there, make some shortcuts and stuff, and then get rid of the sword so I can have my jumps back, go back to get that stupid chicken, and then move through this sort of newly shortcutted world that you've created, and suddenly you have the chicken now in a new part of the map, and there's a bunch of new stuff you can do. It's little moments like that, the sort of little discoveries that make the game really interesting, and like I said, there's also lots of mysteries. I found this particular place called the Tetra Chamber, and I have no idea what to do at it yet. I have been to it a couple of times with some different items just to see what would happen, and as of yet, I have not figured out what to actually do, but I want to keep trying. It gives you some subtle hints, and I think I may have finally figured out a little bit of it after I've gotten farther and seen some new things, but it's just one of those little things that you find that you're not completely sure about. And there are other areas that I haven't even gotten to yet, like this desert area that I know exists because I've seen a little bit of it, but I just haven't quite found out the right way to get there yet without getting myself killed. So it's all those little moments of discovery mixed with the moments of finding new things that you have to then work towards the next time that keeps you sort of going in this game, which is an interesting sort of gameplay loop, but an interesting way to actually do it. I should also mention that the game has a really nice soundtrack. Like, it sounds very, very good. It's very Zelda-esque, actually, like old-school Zelda-esque NES style. But it sounds quite nice, and there are lots of different songs in the game depending on the situations and places that you find yourself in. And it also has this pixel art style that actually has a lot of personality to it. There's a lot of odd personality in the eyes of all the little characters, I gotta say, and all the various events that happen do actually have some personality added to them because of the look of everything. It's kind of neat, actually. Reventure is a very inexpensive game. It's only $8, and that's not a sale price or anything, that's just how much it costs. And I think that if you want what this game offers, then this is a very, very good example of that style of gameplay, and you honestly don't find that in very many places. So if you do want to check it out, please do feel free to visit the link to the Steam page in the description below this video. Like I said, it's $8, very cheap, very cheerful, and the reviews do not lie. It is a lot of fun. It's very compelling to be presented with this world of puzzles that you will slowly break apart, and will each result in their own weird, absurd adventure coming to some sort of crazy end as you do it. This is Reventure. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. If you liked what you saw, feel free to like the video, and if you didn't, feel free to dislike it and tell me why. Thanks again for joining me, and that's that. I'll see you guys next time.